My name's Kian Mintz-Woo. I'm a lecturer at the Philosophy Department and in the Environmental Research Institute. And my role is predominantly in researching applied ethics, so applied to medical ethics and applied to climate change. Yeah, so when we think about what we can do in terms of climate change, we often distinguish between what individuals can do, what we can do to reduce our personal carbon footprint, let's say, versus what we can do socially, that is, politically, that is, with activist groups and so forth. And so when we're talking about this, we might think about what I can do to reduce my own carbon footprint, to reduce the amount of resources I use. And we might contrast that with things we can do as a community, in groups, politically, through political parties and so forth. So I think that when we talk about individual and systemic action, we often think of these as maybe contrary views or things that we can choose one or the other, but I think that they're actually mutually beneficial. I think that when we act as individuals, that helps us to solidify our roles in terms of being part of a community that acts. And similarly, when we exemplify what we view as our own values, what we view as our own goals, that helps to reinforce for others what they can do and creates a knock-on effect. So I think that when we're talking about systemic action, it's important to have that sort of resonate with our individual views, with our individual actions, and with our own goals. So in the Irish context, there's a lot of things we can do. Obviously, individually, there's everything from within your family, trying to coordinate care for the environment, whether that's small things like cleaning up or tidy towns, or maybe larger things like joining groups, or activist groups, social groups that care about climate change. Obviously, there are movements like Fridays for the Future, which are very influential in trying to get young people engaged in climate action. But I think that what's really important in Ireland today is where we stand at a very, very pivotal moment in our political action. So right now, of course, there is this national climate plan, and it has been passed into law. But how we actually negotiate that, how we decide to act as that, how we choose to coordinate with others, how we support the political actions and so forth, all of these things are up in the air. And that means that right now, it's very important to try to see how we can contribute to making Ireland reach this ambitious 51% reduction that we have in law. Because if we can manage to do that, we can be a model for other European countries, we can be a model for the world. And I think that Ireland today is the kind of country that should be proud to be at the forefront of this. So I think trying to figure out how we work as individuals and how we work in society is extremely important and not so easy. We might think that there's all these pressures to look at it one way or the other. And I think that that's, for most of us, psychologically not the right way to think about it. It's not an either or, it's a both and. I think we should think about ways we can reduce our footprint for things that are important to us to keep. But we should also be trying to encourage others to act, and we should try to participate in social movements, in political processes, in other ways that we can try to coordinate mass action. Again, today in Ireland, we stand at a really important crossroads, where if we work together, we can try to push Ireland into a greener future. And I think that there is a blueprint in place, and with the coordination, we can manage to do that. I think it's about thinking in that broader picture, trying to motivate us to work together, to coordinate our efforts, and to add up to a picture that we want to see. And there's a couple of things that are important here. One thing that's important to think about is that many people don't realize how many other people care about climate change. If we recognize that it's not an issue just for some activists or some people who are especially working on it, but everyone cares about having a climate for their future, for their children, for their grandchildren. And that's something that if we understood how many others cared about it, that would allow us to be more comfortable in acting. So if we understand that other people care about climate change as much as we do, that'll make it comfortable to act. That'll make it comfortable to discuss these, and that'll make it comfortable to come together as a country and coordinate our efforts. So sometimes we hear this argument that individual action is inefficacious, it's not important, it's too small. And when you think in terms of a very large global problem, maybe you think, oh, well, what could I do that could possibly matter? And I think that that thinking is both factually wrong and also psychologically counterproductive. So let's talk about why it's factually wrong. First of all, we don't know where all of the impacts of climate change are coming in. There are many, many impacts. They come at different spatial and temporal scales. They have different risks associated with them. So every time we contribute to reducing our emissions, we might be making a difference to some of them. Now, you don't know exactly where that's going to be, but there's always that chance of acting. That's at the very small micro scale. At the global scale, we can say something even stronger. When you think about climate change impacts, we know that the impacts of climate change are worse when there are more emissions in the system. So we say every extra emission hurts more or does more harm when there's already more in the system. Going from 2.1 to 2.2 is much worse than going from 1.7 to 1.8, for example. So what does that tell you? That tells you if you are pessimistic about other people acting, let's suppose you think that other countries are not going to step up. You think other people are not going to act. So you think they're going to put their emissions into the system. If that's the case, you should act more aggressively. Why is that? Because your extra emissions are going to make more of a marginal impact. They're going to prevent more damage. They're going to avoid more harm. So that means that when the more pessimistic you are, actually the more hard you should fight to act. But there's also the psychological aspect. When you see other people act on climate change, it makes it easier for you to act, it makes it easier for you to follow and to continue to increase the power of those norms. And changing norms in society is how we get large-scale change.